to myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It's Wednesday night and it's our new night for Retro Night. It's Newcastle United versus Manchester City that we're looking at today. Some great games, some humdingers between those two teams. And as always, I am joined by Mitch, Steve Hasty, George Mitchell and Steve Wilkinson. Stu Penman's back next week. So good evening, lads. You okay?
Yeah.
Good evening. Yes.
Great.
Good stuff. Slightly delayed because I had some internet issues which seem to have cleared themselves up now, so I'll touch some wood and hopefully we'll get through this all okay. We've got to pay tribute though, as football fans, if nothing else, to the late great Maradona, 60 years of age. He has passed away today, and somebody I know who Nobby Solano holds in very high esteem, having played with him as a youngster. And somebody, of course, who tormented England with the hand of God, but also with a touch of genius when he outstripped Peter Reid and Peter Beardsley, to name but two, and scored that wonderful second goal. As I say, a lot of people who are football fans struggle to forgive and forget, but there's no doubt in my mind he was probably one of the biggest players in the world at that time, and a football genius, and certainly deserves to be revered up there with the likes of Pelé and possibly our own Paul Gascoigne, somebody who captured the heart of his particular nation, and I'm sure the people in Argentina will be mourning for many, many days to come. But just a quick word on him, Mitch, from your point of view. Maradona, no doubt he was a genius, but probably better known for his ill health over the last few years. Obviously, and his antics off the pitch as much as the antics on the pitch.
A proper flawed genius, and one who I struggle to put into my best World 11 ever simply because of the flaws. And yet somebody who undoubtedly could do anything he wanted with a football. I think some people would pay to watch him warm up, Lucky enough to have seen him play in the flesh on one of our random Barcelona trips. Genuine, we use the word legend quite easily these days, and he's got to be, in spite of his flaws. But also has connections over here. Spent a lot of time in the UAE. If you go onto Twitter and have a look at Chris McCarty, who's the head of sport at Dubai Radio, was actually a teammate of his in leagues over here, and has some amazing stories of somebody who, a flawed genius he may be, but somebody who also had a human side that so many people around him that I know over here who met with him and interacted with him have got nothing but good things to say about him, But concentrating purely on the football side, like I say, some people would have paid to watch him warm up because some of the things he could do with the ball were just ridiculous.
Steve, Neil calls him a flawed genius. Would you agree?
Yeah, he was a flawed genius because of all the, like as Neil says, all the off-field problems that he had. Anyone who's seen the Maradona film, I was fascinated by it, the one that came out last year. The trials and tribulations of his time in Italy after he left Spain, the way that he left for Italy, the way that he then left Italy, all of those type of things. And I agree with Neil in terms of, absolutely fantastic footballer, but will always be remembered in the UK, certainly in England, I think, and in Scotland, by the way. Scotland, I think the Scots loved him, but he'll always be remembered in England for the hand of God, But as you said at the start there, Steve, a remarkable footballer, a goal of absolute genius to take England completely out of the game. But the hand of God will be something that I'll always remember. I was actually I was in Rhodes, in Lindos at the time, watching that game with a bunch of lads who were in making a film at that particular time. And the place was rocking. We were all convinced we were going to get to the final. And I just remember the absolute sheer anger in that bar that night when we saw what had happened. Because at the time you didn't, I think people still weren't convinced that he'd actually handled it. It was very difficult to tell, especially on a small TV in a pub. But when we eventually got, the close-ups and such like after the game, I just devastated.
Yeah, George, he does leave a sour taste in the mouth when you think back to the hand of God, but he was a fantastic footballer, and I watched the same documentary and film as Steve has in the past as well, and the amount of admiration they have from not only in Argentina but in Italy as well.
Yes, and not surprising, because off the field he was obviously a likeable person and did lots of things in the community where he lived, wherever he lived, did lots of things, which is doubly sad that he went the way he did. In fact, there was a bit on Twitter or Facebook not too long ago where he was playing with a football, and it almost brought me to tears. He was so bad at controlling the ball, when in fact we all knew he did not just control it. It was almost as though it was attached to his laces. He was so good. And this piece on, I think it was Facebook, showed him, and I think he was the worst for wear with white powder as well. But he couldn't keep you up more than twice. He was absolutely, totally off it, and it almost brought me to tears. It was so sad, because there's no doubt about it, an absolute genius. And as I say, when you read about him and see some of the documentaries, he got involved with the community where he was playing. And I think that's why Nobby likes him so much, because in South America, he wasn't just a footballer. He was a community involvement sort of person. And as Nobby was, the same sort of character. But it's terribly sad. He was a cheat and all of those things, but that doesn't alter the fact that in the early days, he was a footballer, nobody could take it off him. He was so good.
Yeah, Steve, any thoughts on Diego Maradona, who we've lost today at age 60?
Yeah, I think it's a shame that he's tarred with a brush of the hand of God. That sort of robbed, took the views people have. There's some comments coming up there. They cannot forgive him and things like that. And he had that low sense of gravity, which a lot of the smaller players, you take like Messi and Aguero, that they seem to have a low sense of gravity, and they can control the ball brilliantly. And he fell into that category. And he went on his day. He was great. It was just a shame that he was tarred with that brush of the hand of God.
Yeah, I did have the opportunity to bring Maradona here a couple of years ago, and the idea was essentially to put him and Peter Shilton on as part of an event, but Peter Shilton is probably joining a few of our people in the chat tonight. He couldn't forgive him. He just said he could never share a stage with him because he never apologised, and he says even an apology probably wouldn't heal the rift. And I've just seen Peter Reid pay tribute to him on TV. Funny enough, my wife, who can't stand football, the first thing she said was monkey's heat when he came on. At least that's got
another legend. Another legend.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's very hard. But if you're a player that suffered the hand of God, then you're always going to struggle. I've done plenty talkings with Peter Beardsley. Of course, he's talked about it as well. There's Peter there, of course, and Peter Beardsley and Peter Reid together, and that's just before that second goal that he scored in that particular match. But yeah, as I say, we had to dedicate some of the show to him. He's may he rest in peace. He's a bit of a tortured soul, and as it's the Retro Show, happy birthday to David Kelly. He scored a goal on the telly. David Kelly, a bit of a legend in these parts for what he did for the club, and been back up a couple of times, supported an event for the food bank at the Irish Centre in recent times, but lovely guy as well, top man, still involved in football to this day. We'll wish him many happy returns. So today we are looking at Newcastle versus Manchester City, and George, we always start with you as what can I say? The elder statesman? Is it okay to call you that?
Well, I've been called worse, so that'll do. That's lovely.
Yeah. So from our perspective, over to you, George, for your first memories of Newcastle versus Manchester City.
Well, it's a first memory because it's a very personal one. It's Manchester City. It's at James's Park in I think it's '68, and the beat were 4-3. But what a brilliant match. And why it's a very personal thing was the centre-half for Manchester City that day was a lad from Gateshead who I played with lots of times in the juniors. called George Heslop, and George Heslop was playing that day, and he left tickets at the players' entrance for a few of us to go in and watch the game, and had a chat with him as well. So it was a very personal thing seeing George play against United, but also it was a sign of the times, because the team was very much heading towards the demise of things, or the coming on of things like the Fairs Cup team and that sort of thing. But their team as well, suddenly names like Colin Bell, Franny Lee, were running the big names in football, and they weren't just in the Premiership, but also for England. I mean, they were mainstays for England as well, and there was one or two other real characters like Mike Summerby in the thing. It was a fantastic game, as 4-3 would tell you, and it was one end, the other end, and unfortunately they got the last one to make it 4-3. Nearly 50,000 at the ground in the ground, so you could see it was quite a draw for Newcastle fans in those days to go and see this Manchester City team. But as I say, why not, with people like Franny Lee, Colin Bell. One player that they had who I think never got the credit for how good he was Paul Young. Paul Young. He was a midfielder, and I think he did all the hard work. But Colin Bell and Franny Lee got all the credit for the goal scoring and setting and the assists. But Young, I think, did a lot of hard running and what we call nowadays box-to-box running to take the pressure off them. But another great player. George Heslop had a good game. He didn't disgrace himself. Interestingly, talking about George, remember I said to you when I was a junior and made this statement about, if you're not happy, come and see me. Well, George Heslop was one of the ones that did go and see him. And the reason he did was George Heslop couldn't stand the bloke that ran the ends and the juniors. So he went, because ex-headmaster, and George Heslop went and seen him and said, look, I'm not at school now and I can't play for that bloke. You either play me somewhere else or I go somewhere else. So he played most of his junior time in the A team and the B team, which we don't have now. And so the only time I seen George when we were playing was if I got a game in the A or the B team, and he was there. But he was a good friend, and as I say, he never forgot where he was from Gateshead. He never forgot his friends. And typical of George, he left tickets for all to get about, I think it was about 5 who went in to see the match on the tickets he left. But it was a great game, absolutely super game. So that's me first.
Great stuff, George. Thanks. Steve, your first memory of Newcastle and Man City.
No, I think, as you know from what I sent you the other day, George has picked the same game that I was going to look at. I sent Steve some YouTube footage of that game, which obviously is not allowed to play, I guess, for copyright reasons. Just to add to that was the game that I chose. I'd only been going for a few years, but I can add a bit to what George has said about the significance of that game, because we just avoided relegation the year before, finished in third bottom. 22 teams in the league at that time. We finished 20th, and in this particular season we finished 10th, and that was because Man City won the league, and they won it as a result of that game. And the situation before that game was that they were level on points with Man United at the top of the league.
That's right.
Man United were playing Sunderland at home that day, but and Sunderland actually won that game. It wouldn't have mattered because Man City were ahead on goal average, which is how they used to decide things in those days before goal difference came in. I think they got rid of goal average because if you became level, it sort of favoured the teams with the lower number of goals, and that wasn't what you wanted. So I think it was about the late 70s when they brought goal difference in as the decider. But as I say, that we finished 10th that day in the league. And at that time, after that game, we didn't realise that we were likely to get in the Fairs Cup, but it was the way that the games that followed that took place. Man United had been they were halfway through a game against Real Madrid in the semi-final of the European Cup. They'd won the first leg at Old Trafford, and they were due to play away on the Wednesday night after that. They got a 3-3 draw, and then got into the final, and as we know, they beat Benfica. So that put them into the European Cup as runners-up in the league, but also as the holders. And City got in as the winners of the league. The other thing that happened is West Brom beat Everton in the cup final the following week, and then so that got them into the Cup Winners' Cup as it was in those days. And so the places for the Intercities Fairs Cup was 4 teams. Nowadays you would be the next 4 teams down in the league, but they had a rule then of the one city, one club. And if you look at the top 10, how it panned out was Man City were top, Man United second, Liverpool came third, so they got the first place. Leeds came second, got the second place. Everton would have got in, but because of the one city, one club rule, Liverpool were in, so Everton weren't allowed to be in. Next came Chelsea, who got the third place in the Intercities Fairs Cup. The 7th top of the league was Spurs, so they didn't get in because Chelsea were in, another London team. West Brom got into the Cup Winners' Cup. Arsenal were 9th. They didn't get in because Chelsea were in, and we finished 10th. And as a result of being the 4th team in the ratings of one city, that's how we got into the league, and there was into the Fairs Cup, and there was a big hoo-ha, and you can imagine that probably still bearing the grudge today, which is why we'll have a lot of bother with the league. Lord Westwood at the time, the chairman, had to do a lot of fighting and arguing as to whether the one city, one club rule should apply and all that. And eventually, I think, well after the season had finished, we got told that we could have the 4th place, and the rest history, as we know, and went on to win it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing,
stuff.
If you watch that, can I just say, if you watch that clip, it's black and white and it's pretty horrendous pictures. One of the things, and George will remember this, Man City fans were all over the ground. It wasn't like your end and our end, and mass segregation. A lot of integration, and you can see on the videos when the goals are going in, because it's, as George said earlier on, it's a ding-dong match. They were winning 1-0, we equalised, they took the lead 2-1, 2s each half-time, they then went 4-2. You can see all over the ground fans of both teams shouting up and down when, and I think I can remember clapping them off the pitch at the end, George, because it was just a great game, and worthy champions, worthy champions.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, Steve Hasty, on to you, mate, with your memories of Newcastle versus Man City.
I was at that game as well, believe it or not, as an 8-year-old. And Steve's talked about the ground itself. I was in the old Popular side, which is now the East Stand. My dad took us to that match. And I think my memory was exactly what Steve's just said there about the crowd. It was the biggest crowd I'd ever been in as an 8-year-old. I was like 47,000 there. Manchester City fans all down that Popular side, intermingling with Newcastle fans. Not a bit of bother, I think. But the other interesting piece about that game was that Man United were playing Sunderland, and Man United could have won the championship if we'd beaten City and they'd beaten Sunderland. Sunderland actually beat Man United, as it happened, 2-1. So the result was sort of incidental. But I mean, just to be in a big crowd, big atmosphere, as a young 8-year-old, and just being like sort of, I think, was that 8? That's 7 coming on to 8. And just being sort of, embroiled in the whole atmosphere and seeing people, and actually seeing something, believe it or not, the one thing we've forgotten, Steve and George, seeing a club win the league.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Mitch, what about you? Your memory of Newcastle Man City, your first memory?
I'll spin me forward to 83 October. The first season that I was really allowed to go on my own with my mates from school. Keegan, the whole Keegan furore and passion for Keegan. And we had Beardsley, we had Waddle, with great team. You'd turn up the Gallagher end, the queue at 12 o'clock, and you'd join the queue. And you'd want to get in. And basically 5-0 on the day, Beardsley hat-trick. And it was a hat-trick with everything, absolutely. And you know how Newcastle United has this amazing ability to suck you in. And that's the first time I remember walking away from a game thinking, this is it. We're never going to lose another match. We're going to win absolutely everything. We're winning the league. We're winning the FA Cup. This is it. We're absolutely brilliant. Yeah, it was one of them games. And,
We must have won
and
the
as a
one
kid,
before, did we? Because we
Aye.
had a run of two. Once we get a run of two, we usually think that's it.
absolutely, yeah. But that game was just an amazing game. Coming away as a kid thinking, yeah, this is brilliant. We're just going places here. And a fabulous game, fabulous hat trick from Beardsley. Great team performance as well, you know. Somebody said, I think it was Spenny mentioned on Twitter today about how he can't remember playing Man City that often, and he's right. We had two periods. One period from 78 to 83 to that game where we didn't play each other, and another period from 87 to 94 when we didn't play each other. Both revolving around the first time when we were a bit shit and the second time when they were a bit shit. And so we passed each other on the way back. And so in this sort of like the period that I really remember going to games as a kid and a teenager, we didn't see much of Man City because we were just in different leagues. We were going in different directions.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the advent of the Premiership when they came up and we were already there that it started to play each other more often. And if you look at our record against each other as well, you know, up to 2005 we had a really good record against Man City, and then 2005 on is appalling, absolutely abysmal, and a total reflection of what's happened to the two clubs over that period of time. But my first memory is that game, the Beardsley hat-trick game, 5-0, superb.
Great season as well, of course, the promotion season, 1983-84, and of course we just pipped Man City for third place, which
Yes.
of course got us up.
Yeah.
Didn't put us in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, which of course is, you know, something which nowadays, you know, would only get you in the playoffs, and that would be it. I think my first memory is that game, of course, the the infamous 5-0. I think it's a game which obviously stays long in the memory. I suppose, you know, a lot of people talking in the chat about Alan Shearer scoring the quickest goal for Newcastle United, 10 seconds, against Manchester City as well. I think that was something like 2003. I think a lot of people are suggesting, which again, God, I mean that's such a long time ago now. I think the other one that sticks in the memory for me, and of course it's the goal that wasn't, or should I say the goal that was but wasn't given, was Tiote, God rest him as well.
Yeah.
Another one who went too soon, and he scored an absolute humdinger against Manchester City. Didn't score many goals, of course, got that brilliant goal against Arsenal in the 4-4 comeback for Pardew, but there was nothing wrong with that goal, lads, was there, Tiote?
No.
Scored.
No.
And that was a better goal than his goal against Arsenal for me as well.
Yes.
And it was given off for somebody being in an obstructive position when it was quite clearly he wasn't at all. Absolutely not at all. That was an absolute travesty.
Yeah, it was. It was certainly that. Okay, back to you, George, again for your next memory of Newcastle versus Manchester City.
Well, it's taking you right forward to 2004, and it's another 4-3 when we got the 4 that time. And it was a match that had lots of things, but taking on what Neil said about getting sucked in, this match got me sucked into thinking that this is it. Graham Souness is the guy. He's going to take us somewhere, because we'd struggled to get some form, and he'd managed to get the team playing well. And this game, they played significantly well. There was a Shearer penalty. There was a Robert humdinger, a really hard cracking shot from outside the box. There was a Bellamy runaway from halfway up the field to score the winner. It was absolutely fantastic. And as Neil said, you just thought, this is it. We're on our way, and Graham Souness is the man. Well, how little did I know in those days, and I've learned quite a lot since. But it gave you that sort of feeling. And again, huge crowd, nearly 53,000 for that match, for that game. which it just says a lot about how people felt about the two teams playing together, how important it was. But certainly that game, it was as exciting as the other one, except we won this time. And secondly, as I say, I'd persuaded myself that this is it. Graham Souness has got we're ticking, we're on our way. Well, I'm not sure where we were going to, but it certainly wasn't where I thought we were going to. So that's my second one.
Okay, big shout out to newworkwear.com, specialists in the supply and branding of clothing for the workplace. Mitch got the helmet on straight away there, mate. Good effort. And big shout out to qtechshop.co.uk, makers of pool tables and snooker tables and other stuff in the northeast. They also do the t-shirts, which you can buy from newcastlelegends.com. And of course they do the mugs and the calendars, which we are selling for the West End Food Bank. So anybody fancies a calendar, all proceeds are going to the food bank. They are $9.99 and are selling quite well. So please get yourself onto that. And a big shout out to Super Mac and Gibbo, who will be joining me tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Looking forward to getting the lads on, and they'll be looking ahead to the Crystal Palace game on Friday. Steve Wilkinson, over to you for your second game.
Yes, second game, 1975, cup match. The first time I'd ever been to Main Road, and that was an experience. I think we parked the car in the schoolyard, and I think there was kids around wanting to keep an eye on your car. And I'm sure one kid had a gun. He was about 8-year-old, and you didn't want to park your car in Moss Side or anywhere around there. And but it was. You might not remember. You did the show the other week with Gibbo and Supermac about the run of the FA Cup the year before, and obviously we had the hoo-ha with the Forest game. And the other penalty, apart from having to replay that game, was that we had to play the next leg away, even if we'd drawn at home. And that was the situation on this game at the beginning of January. I think we were drawn at home to Man City, but because of that penalty, we had to play at Main Road. So we played them down there. So see, I went down to the game. I had a seat in the stand, and there was a stanchion right in front of the goal. You couldn't have a worse seat. Now when we are sitting back, we don't have the poles in front of you as much as some of the modern grounds anyway. But I had this pole, and it was right in front of the goal. And I think, if I remember rightly, we won the game 2-0. Mickey Burns and Jeff Nulty scored the goals. And but I think Man City had a lot of the play. And all I could remember was the expecting the ball to hit the net. I could see the net. I couldn't see the goalie, which was, I think it was, it would probably be Mick Mahoney in goal, I think, that game. Can't quite remember. But anyway, as I say, they bombarded our goal quite a lot, but we managed to hold them out and went on to win the game 2-0. So that was a good experience, and I think it's the only time I've been to Main Road. I've been to Etihad since, but it was what Man City was, a club in an old style ground, and for many years, as you just said earlier on, they weren't a very good team. It was only probably in the recent times. When you talk about them being in the Big Six, just that thing there. It's only since their takeover that they've really been classed as one of the top teams. They were up and down over the years, just like us.
Yep, I would agree. Steve Hasty, under you, mate, for your second Man City recollection.
I'm going to miss out the 76 Cup final for obvious reasons. I was going to move on to 83, 84 season, promotion season. The away game that we had down at Main Road, we won. It kind of almost cemented the promotion, if you like. We're on a roll. I remember it for a couple of things. One is in those days you could still get a pint of beer on the terraces. That was very interesting. I remember most of the time standing in the queue for a beer rather. Because it was like just standing there every time you looked past, you saw another one of your pals or somebody that you knew, because everybody from Newcastle seemed to be at that game, and it just seemed to be a constant stream of lads or you knew walking past with 4 pints, taking them to their pal, and then the next one you said, "Oh, is he still here?" and so on. And then I remember going to the queue at half time, and a great big half housey came over the top of the wall, that bounced in front of us and cracked us one on the arm. So that was a good start to the second half, and then come out the ground at the end of the game. They'd corralled us in, and I just remember the police horses and everybody's being squashed. We're trying to squeeze one of these buses for some reason to take one to the city centre, which was a new experience for me because I'd never ever come across that before. We'd always travelled, independently anyway, but actually been trying to be forced onto a bus from Main Road into the city centre. So there we were standing. I just remember this kid next to us. He just went, "Stuff this for a game of soldiers," and he decided to crawl under the police horse and through its legs, just at the point where the police horse decided to just have a pee. So he got showered and stuff as he's going under this police horse as he's crawling. So everybody's in uproar. Everybody's laughing at him. The whole place is in. We got shoved onto the bus, and then we got into city centre. They threw it off the bus, and that's when I suddenly thought, you know what? I wish I really had trained for the Great North Run. And the Great North Run training I'd done had been for the first mile, because it was that point that we suddenly started getting chased all the way through the Arndale Centre. I never ran so fast in my life, Steve. God almighty, it was unbelievable. Then we managed to get back to where we wanted to be. We all got together. We'd all been scattered onto different buses anyway. We eventually, I don't know how we met up. I think we all headed back to Altrincham where we were staying. We got into the bar. And then some joker decides he's gonna kick off in a chip shop on the way home. He's just thinking, God, what a weekend! Why did I do it all for a game of football? It just seemed to be one thing after another. And not only that, when we got into Main Road in the first place, we'd got a taxi in from the city centre, and we'd said take with the Main Road, and of course the taxi driver and his infinite wisdom decided to drop off at the other end. So we then also had to walk all the way through the City fans, pretending we were City fans, or not, as the case may be, till one of my mates decided he would start singing as well. So it's just like, oh hey, those days have long gone, but it's just typical away game stuff, isn't it?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, Mitch, your second memories, Mitch, of Newcastle Man City?
New Year's Day in '94. 94 New Year's Eve was an interesting New Year's Eve because for the lads that we were together at school with, most of them doing 3-year degrees were back in Newcastle having completed their degrees. I was still at dental school then. But it was the first New Year's Eve when everybody was back together. So we'd had a cracking night in Wallsend. Went back to a place in High Farm to a lad's house where everybody had the remit that they had to come home with a sign of some sort. So apologies to the driving instructor whose sign off the top of his car I came home with that evening, if you're watching. I still only finished second because one of the lads managed to grab one of the signs outside the church on Station Road Bank. But anyway, that's another matter. So I ended up the match the next day with the most stinking of hangovers, about 2 hours sleep, feeling rough as, and it was a cracking performance from Newcastle. Easy game. Cole scored 2, should have had 4. It was one of those games where you needed 2 chances to put one away. Really good game. But the other thing it's notable for, it was Brian Kilcline's last appearance in a black and white shirt. And I've got a big soft spot for Brian Kilcline. For me, still to this day, pound for pound, Kevin Keegan's most important signing ever for Newcastle United. Without him, we would have gone down. Without him, we didn't have a platform to build from and get promoted. And so to say goodbye to Killer with such a great performance was very fitting indeed. So that's my next memory, is that New Year's Day in '94 for a number of reasons.
We have touched on cup finals, and of course we did play, as the lads have quite rightly said, Manchester City, of course, in '76. Dennis Chewett, of course, with that overhead kick at Wembley. And who was the manager? Can you remember, lads?
Gordon Lee.
Yeah. There he is, Supermax's favourite manager. But yeah, Gordon Lee, of course, was the manager. But a lot of people saying that we played quite well in that final. We probably didn't deserve to lose it. But I wasn't. Obviously, I was too young. Anybody at that game?
Yes, I was there. Yeah.
What was it like, Steve? Did we deserve something out of it?
We did, yes. I mean, it was an even game until Chewett scored. We were getting beat 1-0, and then Alan Gowland scored just before half time, make it 1 each, and you're sitting there at half time thinking, we've got a chance in this game, and then it was a bit of goal out the blue, the overhead kick that didn't do it, and then I think we just got a bit deflated after that, and probably we didn't deserve to win in the end, but they knocked the stuffing out of us, that goal, and but your heads were held high, having been at Wembley a couple of years earlier and seen that disaster against Liverpool.
Yeah, the cup final, of course, that we did win was in 1955. Jackie Milburn getting what was at the time the quickest goal in FA Cup final history. The lads went on to win 3-1. I've got that on DVD. You can get a copy of that on the back page if you fancy watching it. George,
the picture,
were you...
Steve, sorry. Yeah. No, I wasn't there, but obviously I watched it on TV. But you took me, you persuaded me to talk about Jackie Milburn a couple of weeks or so ago, and that header. You see where he is. This is a man who had the reputation of not being able to head a ball. He's about where the penalty spot is to one side of the goal, and not only head it in the right direction, but right in the top corner. And the Manchester City players, I'm quite sure, had been lulled into this false sense of security that Milburn couldn't head the ball, and all watched for Keeble and all the others. But that I reckon that was a training ground ploy, that they would put it to Jackie from a corner, and because he paid dividends, he headed it in. But he had this reputation, even with our fans sometimes, about not being able to head the ball. Nothing could be further from the truth. He was a great header of the ball. And the other opposite, of course, was Mick Keeble, which why people used to watch Keeble. He was fantastic in the air, had that reputation. In fact, the Newcastle fans used to have this joke that if we got a penalty, they should let Keeble take it with his head. He was so good with his head. But as I say, that picture brings back so much about Jackie Milburn.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the grounds. Obviously, Manchester City now onto the second ground, the second main ground. Of course, we had Main Road. Did any of you guys visit there on a regular basis? What did you make of it? I quite liked Main Road. It wasn't one of my favourite grounds, but it was a football ground as opposed to the Etihad, which I've been to. Etihad is a wonderful stadium. I've been to a few gigs down there. I went to see the Stone Roses there when they reformed. I've been down to see one or two other gigs down there. It's wonderful for gigs. The only problem is it's a little bit on the outskirts of Manchester. You have a hell of a walk into the city from there when you go to gigs and the like. But yeah, anyone got a preference for Man City's first ground, Main Road? Steve, George,
well, it's a traditional football ground. That's how I'd describe it, Steve. It's a sort of ground where you go, you know what you're going to expect to get. I've only been there once, but as I say, a traditional football ground as far as I'm concerned, and one which I had no qualms about going or thinking about going. Not been to the Etihad at all yet, but as I said, I think the other week about West Ham, the London Stadium. When a stadium's been built for something else, it's very difficult to make it a football stadium. No matter what you do with it, you end up with this huge gap of about 12 or 15 metres before the pitch, and that tends to kill the atmosphere, I think. And then I think the Etihad suffers from that as well, from what I see on television. I've never actually been. But as I say, Main Road, traditional football ground as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, okay. Steve Wilkinson?
The thing about the Etihad, I think it just shows it's not so much the ground itself. Once you get inside, it's like all the new modern grounds. But I think it's the outside and the surrounding areas, just to show how they've developed it since their takeover happened. And the same thing could happen at Newcastle. They've developed. I think there's a little stadium attached to that where the women play, and they've all got the training complex there, and it's all part of that massive complex. And we went in by coach, so I couldn't work out how far out the city centre it was, but it's a massive setup, and an all right ground, but it was and the fans don't seem to like it. They cannot get it full for a lot of the Champions League games, can they? They're struggling to sell tickets, so that I cannot believe it's got the same sort of atmosphere as the older grounds.
No,
Yeah, Steve Hasty.
Yeah, I mean, Main Road was your traditional ground, wasn't it? You know, it was in the heart of the community. It was in the back streets, all of that type of thing. A typical Lancashire ground, to be perfectly honest. Ramshackle, you know, not much money invested in it really. Forced to put up stands, all that type of thing. Look at it; it's a mishmash of all sorts. They were desperate to move on, and ironically, it was the Commonwealth Games that probably was the catalyst, not only for, well, it was the catalyst for City moving because they were basically given it, but it was the catalyst for the takeover because when the Abu Dhabi consortium came in and they saw, you know, the fact that they had this basically been given a ground, they weren't going to pay an awful lot of money for it. But as Steve said, the facilities around, you've got the velodrome as well, which is on the other side of the dual carriageway. Yeah. You've got that small little ground that holds about, I don't know, 8,000-10,000, something like that, where the ladies' football's played. Fantastic facilities. But it seems to be a mismatch of everything. Inside, I thought the facilities were pretty poor, especially where the away fans were. Not view-wise, but like sort of in the concourses and that. I thought the security to get in was ridiculously over the top. I thought that, you know, this ground that has a stage at the back of it, you know, where they want to entertain you and they bring people on, and then they have bands on and they have the bars around the place, very much in the German style, where you go to one place, you get a hot dog, you go to another place for a burger, you go to another place for a drink. You've got a club shop there in among it where you can go in, which I went into just because it was freezing cold. To be perfectly honest, because the game, I got there early and the ground didn't open until like 2 o'clock, 1:30, something like that. So you just find yourself ambling around because there's nothing else there, you know, nothing else at all. So I find it quite sterile. And then, of course, you've got the other situation of, as you say, as we mentioned there, the City fans, a lot of them don't like it. A lot of City fans don't. They're a bit like us. They don't like to be told what to do. Getting back to the takeover of them and the way that it was managed. I mean, Mitch and I sat with some lads from Manchester City, and I think I've mentioned it before, back in 2008 at what was then the Football Supporters Federation event down on the quayside, and these City fans came up, and that's when we first heard that the Abu Dhabi consortium had come in for Newcastle at one point, and then Ashley had knocked them back. And of course, what happened then was he then went to Manchester City. Nothing had ever leaked out about that until these lads told us. And it was kind of, I bet you're sick. And then, of course, they then told us about some of the things they've done to really get themselves sort of hooked into the crowd and hooked into the fans. We talked about the buffet that they laid on for fan groups to decide what sort of chips you wanted to eat. Do you want the ones that were sharp on the top of your mouth, or do you want the big fat chips and all that type of thing? And that was the way that they have built themselves.
Yeah. Pie tasting as well.
That's right, pie tasting competitions and all sorts, you know. Phenomenal. I mean, and you look at the success that they've had, and I think Mitch and I, especially because of that, we look back and think, you know, that more than anything else, that when we found out that could have been us, and it stuck in our throat that day. And I remember reporting when we got back to the NUFC meeting on the following Monday, and we were telling everybody, supposed to be telling them about the FSA, the FSF as it was then, and about what had been said, and what David Conn, who was the reporter at the time, was there to do the presentation. But we didn't. We just talked about the fact that, did you know Man City were going to buy her, and then the Man City owners were going to buy her, and then Ashley knocked them back, and that just kicked off, didn't it, Mitch?
Yeah, aye. But equally, you know, we then came across that again more recently when we were talking to Midat and Benzaya Group about trying to get them back into the fray. When he said that they had looked at what Man City had done, and he used the phrase 100 days of meetings with the fans.
Yeah.
And that they wanted to reach out to everybody and hear what people wanted and get people tasting pies and chips and what do you want at the game and what do you want to feel at the game, etc. You know? That was a super frustrating weekend, more frustrating than probably it should have been at all. But it was also fascinating to hear how once Man City were bought, the Abu Dhabi group had really sort of tried to buy into the culture of the game. And coming back to the grounds, I mean, Main Road was a horrible place to go as a away fan, in a horrible part of Manchester with a bit of edge, more edge than a broken piss pot. You know, it was a horrible place to get off the coach in. You felt intimidated. It was a ground, and I've used this phrase before, with soul and connection and history you could feel. There's none of that at the City of Manchester Stadium. The only thing they've done to try and combat this disconnection for a non-football stadium being used for football was, if I remember right, they've dug the pitch down a little bit to try and put extra seats up to the edge to reduce that distance from the edge of the pitch to the fans. But it certainly doesn't seem to resonate with the fans, because you see how many empty seats there are. Either those fans have become complacent and arrogant because they're used to winning shit, or they just don't like the feel of the ground, or maybe it's a mix of both. I don't know which. But the City of Manchester Stadium certainly doesn't have that soul that Main Road had, and I think, you know, it's sad that we're losing that left, right, and centre through grounds throughout the country.
Yeah, that's the problem with new stadiums, unfortunately. But one other mention tonight before we get on to the celebrity fans and then the players that have played for both teams is this incident: Tino Asprilla and Keith Curle, which has obviously gone down in history. It was a 3-3 draw, as a lot of people have mentioned in the chat. But probably best known for Tino really just settling into English football, experiencing what a good old-fashioned centre-half was going to do to you. And Keith Curle got one back, didn't he, that day? And they both ended up on FA charges, if I remember rightly. And there was talk originally of Tino being suspended for potentially 11 games going into that infamous title run-in. But fun memories of Tino, I suppose. George, you always look back, he was a bit of an enigma, but that's one of those things that he'll always be remembered for.
But again, we talk about Maradona being flawed genius and all the rest of it. I think you could put Tino in that category as well. I mean, you never knew what he was going to do. It could be anything. It could be brilliant. It could be laughable. But it was never dull. He was never dull, that's for sure. And I remember seeing that incident. And I mean, as you say, he just started to realise what playing in the Premiership in England was going to be like, and decided to get some of his own back. But never dull when Tino was on the pitch, that's for sure. Brilliant in the air, superb on the ground, and could score from anywhere with his feet if he put his mind to it. So, yeah, I mean, brilliant player. Yeah. In fact, we're lucky to have had Tino, I think.
Yeah,
another game, Steve, to think about, just very, very quickly, and quite resonates with what's been going on over the last couple of weeks, was that 2-1 game in 2019 when we were 1-0 down after about 20-odd seconds. And we ended up winning 2-1, and I think we only had something like 27% of the possession.
Yeah,
and you look at that, and now we're getting 27% of the possession, and we're getting beat. But in those days, back in that particular game, which was, I was sitting with George, I was just fascinated by the way we played that game, watching that back five line up, and I've got the team here, and you look at it. This is compared to what, I mean, it's only 2 years ago. We started with Dubravka and goal. We had Yedlin, Shaw, Lascelles, Lejeune and Ritchie as a back five. We had Perez, Hayden, Longstaff and Atsu as a midfield. We had Rondon up on his own. And we got 27% possession. We scored a penalty and a goal. And we hardly touched the ball. But the manner of that game, I just found absolutely fascinating, because it was like watching chess. And you're watching Guardiola, weren't we, George, on one side of the dugout, with all these signals and all the possession, and nothing was going right for them. He could not break Rafa's team down. And you had Rafa in totally opposite mode, gathering his troops, marshalling them, telling them exactly. And I think in that particular game, those 10 outfield players followed the plan to the letter.
Yeah.
And we ended up winning. Now,
Well,
look at that team.
Rafa was that. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, you
Rafa
look
was
at that
actually.
team,
Sorry.
and there's hardly anybody in that team now that he even plays, even though he could play Yedlin. He got rid of Lejeune. Lascelles is injured. Richie's injured. They got rid of Perez. They got rid of Atsu doesn't play, and they got rid of Rondon. And Dubravka's injured as well. You know,
And the other thing, Steve, is that you mentioned Lejeune, who's tearing up the pitch in Spain at the moment.
Yeah.
They're lauding him as being a hero at where he is. But the other thing about it is, talking about Rafa, he stood in that technical area, and we could hear, couldn't we, when it was quiet periods. He was telling this defender, "You go there, you go there." He was almost playing the game from the touchline.
Yeah. Well, I was on the other side, and you could see his hand action.
Somebody run it
doing all
off.
this.
Run it off. Yeah, quite different.
He was like
Quite
a conductor,
different.
wasn't he? On the other, you hand action was going, you
he-
come this way and that way, and they
Absolutely.
were watching him and taking notice of him. Now
Absolutely.
they've got no idea to go and think what Bruce is saying, because he's going to be scratching his head. That's all he'd be doing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're coming up to the last 10 minutes. So as always, we go through some celebrity fans to see if the lads can identify who they are, and then we'll go to the players who played for both teams, and we'll get the lads to pick their Newcastle Manchester City combined 11. So first up, celebrity fans for Man City, and the first one is
Jason.
Jason
Manford.
Jason Manford, the comedian. That's right. And the next one should be quite easy. This
it's Ricky Hatton.
Ricky Hatton.
Ricky Hatton, of course. Yes, the fighter from Manchester, big Manchester City fan.
That's Liam and Noel.
Gallagher's.
Gallagher brothers.
Liam and Noel Gallagher, of course. Often see Noel on the television coverage at the match at the Etihad. This is the trick one. This is me banker.
Nah, got me, Steve, I'm afraid.
Silence from the panel. I've done it again. It's Nigel Bond, the snooker player.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Nigel Bond, okay.
Life's been good to him, mate. Yeah, mate.
I do. You've got to bear in mind, lads, I do scour the internet for the worst possible photo of these people.
Oh,
Boxer, is it?
no, comedian. Yeah, no, it's
Looks like Joe Bugner or somebody.
is it?
Close.
Is it a DJ?
It
yeah,
is.
DJ Mark somebody.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, Radcliffe.
Mark Radcliffe, well done, lads. Good teamwork. Good teamwork. And your last celeb?
That's the guy who brought down the bank.
That's the one. What's his name?
Yeah.
Nick.
Oh,
Nick.
Barons.
Yeah.
He brought
Yeah.
down the bank. Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, Christ. Aye.
Anyone get the surname?
No, I can't remember.
We'll give it a Dunhill Baines is on a right for me. Yeah, he got Nigel Bond. There we go, just proof. And it's Nick Leeson.
Listen.
Eastern, yes.
Well done, Dunhill. Clean sweep for him on the picture side of things. Well done, mate. Okay, on to the players who played for both teams. We'll start with the manager, and no introduction needed.
Yeah.
KK.
Special K, Kevin Keegan, of course, who went to Man City and didn't quite eclipse, the same kind of euphoria at Man City as he did at Newcastle, but got them promoted and certainly set the ball rolling for their domination of the Premier League, which was to come in later years.
My second match, of course, he was managing Manchester City, and I think that's why there was 52,000 crowd, because Keegan was on the
exactly.
bench as well.
Okay, players.
Andy Cole.
Andy Cole, of course. Yeah.
Lawrence
Lawrence
Charvet.
Charvet.
Yeah.
Lauren Charvet, yes. Mark and Thierry Henry there.
Right.
Bellamy.
Bellamy.
Craig Bellamy, exactly. John Carver's best mate in football.
Yeah.
Sibierski.
Antoine Sibierski, yes. Good haircut.
Distan.
Yeah.
Sylvian Distan.
Stuart.
Yes.
Stuart Pearce. Friend of the show next.
Steve
Howie.
Steve Howie, of course, who had the joy of scoring in a Manchester derby.
Yeah.
Milner.
James Milner, great servant to Liverpool, to Manchester City, and he did okay at Newcastle. He was a miss when he gone.
Sold too soon.
Absolutely.
Joey Barton.
Joey Barton in his younger days.
Shea Given.
And Shea Given, there we go. Easy one this week, lads, to be fair, with players, and I'm sure that you've managed to knock up a really good team from the players, and a few that I haven't mentioned. So who should we go with first? Mitch, will go with you tonight.
Great. Okay, in goal, I've got to put John Burridge. I love Budgie, love him to bits. Got to know him a little bit out here because he lives out here. And I've got to interact with him a little bit through Joe Morrison, who used to work for NUFC.tv, who's out here as well. So yeah, Budgie, one of my favourite players ever, to be fair. And then back four, I've got Maria Ranson, Steve Howie, Sylvain Distan, and Stuart Pearce. And then I've gone for a bad boy midfield pair of Dietmar Hamann and Joey Barton. And then on the wings, I've gone with Milner and Darren Huckabee. Mm-hmm. And then up front, I've gone with Andy Cole and Wyn Davies. And then obviously my manager, Kevin Keegan.
I don't think there's going to be many different managers. Steve Hasty, you next.
Yeah, I put Shea Given in goal, and I had Charvet and Pierce fullbacks, Howie and Distan centre defence. I went for Dietmar Hamann and Barton in the centre midfield. I went for Huckabee and Milner on either side, and I went for Bellamy and Cole up front. And I had KK as manager.
KK as manager, I thought. Okay, Steve Wilkinson.
Yeah, very close to the teams I've got. Given in goal, Ranson, Howie, Distan and Stuart Pearce. I've gone on a 4-3-3 with Joey Barton, Hamann and Milner in the middle. And up front, Bellamy, Andy Cole and Wyn Davies, my favourite player, centre forward.
Fantastic. Have you gone for KK as manager as well?
Yes, same one.
KK as manager as well. Okay, George, are you going to buck the trend and go for somebody different? What's your team and who's your manager?
No, KK can't get past them, I'm afraid. Burridge would go for sentimental reasons, like Neil, he's a great character, somebody that's easy to get to know, love the place, and that's why I picked him. I've gone 4-2-4. I've got Burridge, Barton, Heslop, Howie, and Pearce at the back. Beardsley and Ivor Broadus in midfield. Two real box-to-box midfielders, not somebody like Shelby that can be box-to-box for 20 minutes. Those two could do box-to-box for 90 minutes. And in the front four, Bellamy, Cole, Wyn Davies, and James Milner. And as I say, KK can't get past him as the manager when he managed both teams. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is really difficult. Keegan, of course, fantastic manager at Newcastle and at Man City. No surprise there. Ray Ranson, of course, played for both teams. Didn't have so much luck at Newcastle, but did really well at Man City. And did he play in that infamous final, lads? The what was it? Was it the Ricky Villa final and the Aussie Ordeal, the one where he scored that goal? I'm sure he was playing in that game.
Yeah, he might have done. Yeah,
he was. Yeah,
so.
Yeah, was it the 81 Cup final? Yeah, where Ricky Villa scored that goal. Yeah, he was. I've got images. I've got memories of him playing in that. But yeah, great stuff, lads. As always.
Nobody wanted to put Stephen Ireland in that team.
No, don't.
Brilliant.
Tell you what, Steve, it flashed up before there about. It said that Liam wore the black and white shirt once at the arena. That was the day after, or the day of the '97 hat-trick Barcelona game, if I remember rightly.
Yeah,
I was at the game the night before, thankfully, because there was no way I was going to go to the one when we were playing Barcelona at home. But I think that's the game where he wore that black and white top. So we've got Tino's goals, we've got black and white top, we've got Liam Gallagher, Man City, all rolled into one to finish off.
Fantastic. As always on the Retro Show, we always give a little plug to the Three Amigos show on Friday. We will have Zara on from the We Are the Geordies film, which of course is coming out on the 11th of December. She'll be on to tell us what it was like putting the film together. We'll also have an exclusive trailer from that as well. I'm looking forward to having Zara on the show. Don't forget, tomorrow night I will have Supermac and Gibbo with us from 6 till 7. Also, we always give a plug to the Three Amigos flyer. And John from Jab has been very busy, as always, knocking up a flyer. So here we go, lads. Friday night show.
Yay.
Next year, lads, we could be millionaires.
Billionaires.
Let's hope 2021 is better than 2020.
Millionaires or people who are millionaires or who spend billions on the football club. I'd be happy with that.
Joie de vivre.
Exactly. As always, we are promoting our Phone a Friend campaign. Call a family member or a friend that you haven't spoken to for a while. It does make a difference. Pick the phone up. Give somebody a ring tomorrow. We're promoting this throughout the month of November. Big thank you to my guests tonight, Mitch, Steve Hasty, George Mitchell and Steve Wilkinson. Great to have you on. Look forward to having you on next week. We'll decide on our chat which team we're going to go for, so we'll make it a surprise next week, lads. But for now, thanks very much. Take care. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Bye, everybody.